Hey, what's going on, everybody? Today is Tuesday, July 9th, 2024, and you're watching the Daily AI Show live. Today, we're talking about using AI to fix AI and specifically OpenAI's CriticGPT. With me today is Andy and Junmi, and I'm Beth. Brian is traveling. We'll let you know if anyone else joins. So, as I said, we're going to explore how AI can actually make itself better, faster, and more accurate. And you might be thinking, what? What? How does that even work? So that's exactly what we're going to unpack today. OpenAI, the creators of ChatGPT, published the post on their blog called "Finding GPT-4's mistakes with GPT-4." While they wrote that, and no one had to say it out loud, but here I am saying it out loud. All right. So basically, CriticGPT is designed to help with reinforcement learning from human feedback, which is how these models are trained. And reinforcement learning from human feedback has a fundamental limitation in that the humans need to recognize the errors in order to give the human feedback. And that is what CriticGPT was created to do. And the evaluation, they published a paper about this too, but basically, CriticGPT plus human found 60% more of the errors, which also included a reduction in hallucination of errors, because as we know, sometimes these models just hallucinate because they think there should be something that they're finding that is the next most right answer. So that's my little intro. Who'd like to get us started? Andy, do you have a little intro for us?
Sure.
Thanks.
So let me talk first quickly about what RLHF, or reinforcement learning from human feedback, is. It's a technique that's used to primarily align models' output with what humans prefer. Because left on its own, unsupervised training of a model by just feeding it a lot of data results in the model hallucinating in some cases, but also in some cases just producing outputs or responses to the users that aren't tuned, if you will, to be the ones that get the thumbs up from the many millions of users, hundreds of millions of users every day of these models. So there's an RLHF pipeline in every major model's system operation. So what CriticGPT is, that what they've done is they've inserted an AI into that labeling pipeline, the labeling process of saying this one's wrong, and it ought to be improved by doing this. So the examples that were provided by OpenAI about how CriticGPT is being used have to do with analysis of the possible mistakes that are in the outputs of code delivered by the code interpreter of OpenAI's model. So they don't use expressly an example of just general queries and responses. They're talking about refining programming code for coders. And so this is an important step, which is to assist, because here's two reasons why CriticGPT is important. One is collecting high quality human feedback, especially on coding examples, is expensive and time consuming. You have to hire really expert coders to be able to recognize the errors that are generated in responses in various languages of code. Like, think of all, you've got to have a whole army of human feedback providers. And so it'll be better and better if you can basically provide models that can do a lot of the heavy lifting of that analysis of the output. Now, I'll point out that RLHF pipelines already use models. In fact, the way they do it is they train a reward model using human feedback. And that reward model is then in the pipeline and is used to provide further feedback to the active model's actual responses that are being done in real time. The other reason this is important is I see it as part of a progression toward the eventual possibility of an AGI explosion where AIs are really interacting with AIs and refining themselves, correcting themselves, and advancing their reasoning capabilities and their knowledge. And I wanted to read a couple of quotes from the sort of the public relations output of CriticGPT from OpenAI. So they're saying this is providing our trainers with explicit AI assistance in their identification of things, just as Beth said. And this is a step towards being able to evaluate outputs, and I quote, from advanced AI systems that can be difficult for people to rate. Okay, so AIs will get more and more sophisticated. It's increasingly, quote, increasingly difficult to train models as they gradually become more knowledgeable than any person that could provide feedback. All right, so this is anticipating a time. Right now, CriticGPT is just being applied to provide assistance to human feedback providers by giving them tips and tricks, just like we might use, right? Oh, here, analyze this article and give me some guidance about what is good and bad about it, the pros and cons or whatever. Well, this is being done against code, but eventually you release the model after it's been fully trained, just like the reward model is released to provide actions today in the RLHF pipeline. A CriticGPT, or a more advanced and well-trained model, will be released to interact at light speed, if you will, with another AI model and advance its capabilities very dramatically. And that's, we're going to talk about this on next Tuesday's show, which is, the Max Tegmark book that really lays out a beautiful narrative about how this would actually work in an advanced artificially general intelligent pair of models working together, and multiple models working together to achieve the incredible capabilities beyond human comprehension in many cases.
Right.
All right, I'll stop there.
Right. And so I just want everybody to know Carl has joined. Thanks, Carl. Good morning. So the idea that that we're being introduced to, that OpenAI is introducing us to the concept of CriticGPT, also seems to be important, right? Like OpenAI does things. OpenAI has said that they're that they're slowly rolling out not just models and improvements, but concepts for us so that people can start to get to understand them. Jumi, I'm wondering what you think about CriticGPT and this in that context.
So I so when Sam Altman, talked about doing a slow release, it really came from the point of view of they're just moving so fast. Everything's moving so fast. So this is an effort for OpenAI to allow people to catch up, right? Give that time to like, oh, this is the latest, greatest thing. Okay, cool. We understand this is coming out. All right, now it's out. Now we're going to use it. Now it's going to be part of our, our processes. Okay, as soon as we get it done with our processes, then they'll come out with a better version, or they'll come out with the next thing. It's along that process, right? So the way I see this, and Andy kind of touched on this a little bit, is this is that next step. Let's introduce something to our customer base and to people in general that may not necessarily be in the space. Because this CriticGPT, it's not conceptually new, right? We have had code reviewers, we've had code enhancing or summarizing, all of these things, just auditing code. AWS has theirs, there's GitHub with their Copilot, all of these kinds of things. So the concept of having AI help people check their code about whatever project they're working on, that's not new. What's what I think the highlight of this is that this is a model that's supposed to work with people in reviewing its own code that it outputs, right? So that's where I think the big difference is. It isn't reviewing human code, it's reviewing the code that other AI models or its other AI models are creating, right? And so I think that's the key distinction that you got to take away from this. Now, of course, while I appreciate the information coming out, I would like to try it now, which I can't. And it's supposed to be an internal tool. I understand, but you know, can I have the kitty version so that I can the Happy Meal version so that I can give it a shot? You know, just because I think it's cool and I want to try out that those tools. But I think overall it's a good strategy. If your approach is to educate people in general about what kinds of things are coming down the pipeline and help identify what your overall or your holistic view for AGI development, because that's their mission, right? To develop AGI. So this helps go step by step. I would love to see a little more timeline wise, but maybe everyone's not really ready to absorb it on that level. So I'm just so excited. I just want more, faster. Can I try it out? Let's see. It's like I'm on my timeline. Star Trek needs to happen now, sooner than later. Let's go. But yeah, I'll leave it there.
Okay. Hey, Carl. So, what are you seeing in terms of CriticGPT affecting the kinds of conversations that you're having with clients? Like, is that even in the realm of conversation?
No, because I think my clients, which I keep mentioning before, are not at that point when it like you could always mention, hey, OpenAI has this CriticGPT that can do, it's designed to, spot errors. And that may give people some comfort. It's interesting. You've got some clients who actually, it's very interesting. One client is using Gemini. Like, it was very first time this person was just mentioning Gemini, actually more focused and using Gemini and Bard than Gemini than actually OpenAI. So that was it was like, oh, that's very neat. And then asking questions, oh, does ChatGPT do the same thing? I was like, how did this happen? I was like, how did this happen? Like, how are you so deep into the Google ecosystem that I was like, did Google birth you? And then like, I don't know how. I was like, how did it was it was really interesting. Anyway, but I do want to pivot though in terms of a CriticGPT. And what I was actually trying now, I didn't think about it, is I wanted either ChatGPT, probably Perplexity or ChatGPT, to review that article. And then based on that review, give me instructions on how to build such CriticGPT, and then build it for myself and then see what I can do with it. But the thing is, I don't think I need to do that, because if that's being built already, and then we have the next round of models coming up, when will it get to that point where it happens behind the scenes and we won't notice it? And I think all these models have to start training, or if we're going to a future with agents, then does it really matter? Because they'll have to look for it, right? Because businesses will need assurances that their agents actually are actually working and doing the things that they need to do and interacting with our personal agents. And then the companies or vendors who were using the agents or representing our agents are doing the exact same thing. So I think that's where I'm seeing CriticGPT, but
yeah,
that's
so
kind of where
I think it's important to follow your thread on agents, because agents are going to be able to take multiple steps, hundreds of steps that of their own generation. They have active control over what steps they're going to take. They're not just following instructions. So these more advanced AI models that are agentic can be given a high level objective, and then they'll develop a plan of action that includes many complex steps, including generating code in multiple steps in order to provide to itself in its pursuit of this objective, to provide these intermediate outputs. So for the agents of the future, we need to have supervision for this reinforcement learning from human feedback that can understand really long, complex chains generated by agents and say, okay, well, that was a good result. Or, hey, back in step 73, I think you might have gone one way or another. Well, that's beyond the ken of most humans to try to understand that and provide feedback for. Even a very advanced programming expert couldn't go through a long agentic chain that involves one model, much less multiple models interacting with each other. So it's really important to train other AIs that are going to have a role in alignment. Okay, and what we mean by alignment is being consistent with human objectives and preferences, like human interests, rather than just the AI's interests. And the doomsayers, of which I'm not one, around AI say, okay, these things are going to talk to each other, and they're going to figure something out that's going to end up damaging human populations in some way. At least not be sufficiently considerate of it. So RLHF is really all about alignment and ultimately super alignment, the generations of future models that are really constitutionally designed to be acting in the interest of humans, not just in the interest of a single human or their owners specifically. Anyway, so agents definitely, and agents can't be supervised easily by humans looking at their output.
So remember, there's two things I want to point out. Several months ago, we were talking about how smaller models, I think, were needed to monitor how larger models were performing. I can't remember the discussion of that, but it was these smaller models were supposed to act sort of like as a supervision to the larger models. Then I just remembered that Devin, a while back, that the coding assistant or the agent that's supposed to happen, I'd be very curious if they've already added, because isn't Devin officially sponsored by OpenAI, or are they working with OpenAI? I can't remember.
I don't think there's a relationship there. Devin was done by a company called Cognitive, I believe.
Yeah. So, but as we build out our agents, is it responsible for us, just users or people who work with companies, as we build these out, to ensure that maybe it's a smart thing for us to do is to build an agent that reviews the agent?
Mm-hmm.
Because of AI is such a wild west right at the beginning, and that Sam Altman always said, hey, we're going to release something, there's no way you can test it in a closed environment. You have to put it out and see where it goes. So maybe one of the learnings would be, if we do have access to these agents, which I've always said the custom GPT is the agent, they're just missing a couple more features. But once that happens, would it be smart of us, or even smart of OpenAI, to build some sort of critique custom GPT that people can use to vet their agents through?
So,
yeah. Well, I was just going to say that this sounds, or this looks like a step towards that direction, right? With CriticGPT. Also, what's interesting is because of adding this other external agent and the way that it seems to function by either collaborating with human input and giving because there are some stats on there like the reflections or the critiques it was outputting with humans involved was more in depth and more descriptive, and was helping humans analyze the overall code better. They preferred it when it was both the CriticGPT
Right.
and the human input together. So that kind of leads me down along the lines of this is one of those kinds of tools that helps iterate, right? We know just ChatGPT in general and LLMs help you through your creative process to iterate on ideas, but this could be that first step towards it being able to iterate quickly for itself or as a component for an agent, right?
Mhm.
So when an agent is breaking down all of the steps that it needs to accomplish the overall goal, and part of that is code building, then you have a separate AI or a separate model that can just iterate on the code over and over and over before it accepts what the result's going to be or what it actually needs, depending on whatever paths that it goes down. So this helps in that automation of that process for those agentic services as well.
So one of the things that I was curious about when I was prepping for today's show was how this compares to Anthropic's approach. Because currently Anthropic's Claude Sonnet 3.5 is a better coder, right? Like that is winning in being able to create good code, execute good code, learn from itself. And when I had my conversation with Perplexity before the show, what seemed to be true is that because Anthropic is a constitutional AI, they start from a place of being helpful and safe, and therefore they need less of the like, oh no, that's down the wrong path, that's going to be dangerous, all that kind of stuff, because that's from the base. We're going to be helpful and we're going to be safe. And I find it really interesting that that seems to be able to create really good results with smaller models. So I'm just curious if anybody else has thought about that or what you think about it.
Well, I was the direction that I was thinking is, if you're going to have something like this, what else can you use it for? So I think initially it's like, oh, we want to make sure about feedback and coding and stuff. But like, hey, what else could you use a critique GPT for that goes beyond something that we can create, like a custom GPT that can critique a lot of things, right? Could it be? But then I started thinking about, wait a minute. So we all know that OpenAI just bought Rockset, which is a real-time, how I've seen it, because I created a video, it had to understand it, where there's real-time data being input and there's real-time indexing. So, and then being able to extract that whole process in real time with the low latency, which is actually pretty remarkable how you would be able to do that. So wouldn't there be there would definitely need to be some sort of system to ensure that there's a check on that, because that's right now what you have is you have fine tuning, you have retrieval augmented generation, or huge context windows. One of those three is usually if you load data into. But with something like Rockset, every single one of those three, there's time that needs ingestion time, review time, asking the query, it still has to analyze time. This thing apparently, as you're inputting the data, it can read the data and spit it back out as you're doing it. So there has to be something that you'd want to critique in there or put in there to ensure that, because I could see so many ways that the output is hallucinated. So many ways, because of the amount of data that people will try to put in as fast as they can put in, or as fast as possible because of different use cases.
Right. And then now I want to say how much of the data is already hallucinated, right? How much of that, like, wow, you really get me. When actually you weren't listening at all. You were just saying like the 4 words that came after each other, right? How much of that is, ooh, Carl, how much of reality is reality?
Well, that's actually, anyway, we can go, that's a different rabbit hole. I know.
Separate show, guys. Separate show. We can contemplate the holographic universe on a separate show.
You were just asking for Star Trek. Yeah.
Yes.
Here we go. Andy, I see you're talking. Yeah.
I am talking. Sorry, I was on mute. I want to take a shot at answering a question that Cisco put in the comments, which is, isn't Q-star a necessary condition for effective agentic behavior? So this is relevant what he's mentioning here, because Q-star is a model-free learning algorithm that allows an AI to basically figure out through experience what works and what doesn't. And that is one of the for the predecessors of truly autonomous agents, which can actually provide a feedback system to themselves that optimizes their performance over time. So it's not a necessary condition, because but it's a sufficient condition, right? I mean, if you use Q-star, that will help you get to more complex and accurate, positive behaviors from an agent, because you've implemented Q-star as a feedback mechanism internally in that system, without having to have human feedback with RLHF, for example, to try to tune the performance of the model by giving it more and more positive examples. RLHF pipelines, as discussed early in the show, those are typically, here's output 1 and here's output 2. Which one is better? It's not like get it exactly right. It's more about refining those and providing the better example to the model in the reward model that's attendant to that RLHF pipeline. So now this model is being trained with a lot of A-B pairs where it says this one's not as good as this one. And that's all that the human feedback provider has to do, is let's say this one's better than that one. And that can feed into this RLHF thing. Now, you saw in the, we never showed it, but in the OpenAI announcement, they show what CriticGPT says about a block of code that was generated by ChatGPT 4. Okay, so CriticGPT says, this step, whatever, I'm not a coder, I couldn't figure it out, but it's going much deeper than just what a human can do, which is say, oh, of these 2 outputs, this one is better. It could also do that, but it's been trained with the ability to actually provide correction to one of those outputs. And that's an important step, I think.
Definitely. And in the way that we have talked about agents in the past, like, this is going to be your financial expert agent. This is going to be your marketing agent. This is going to be the agent that goes out and does those tasks. What we're talking about, and the ability to like insert the corrections, or even Carl, as your as the information is being generated, to analyze it and generate it again, like that kind of speed up. I'm now wondering, like, are agents actually just little groupings of agents, right? Like, is the marketing agent or the expert that we're going to ask to do this particular task, is that 4 kittens in a trench coat, right? Like, are there multiple functions within that we call an agent? Because that's just easier for us. And it's going, because agentic behavior is creating code for itself and then executing the code. Is there automatically the CriticGPT function within it to create code that's going to work, and to create reasoning that's going to work, and all that kind of stuff?
Well,
yeah.
I mean, it could be you have your orchestrator, right? You have your maestro, who you and you may even have, depending on how this is implemented, is you could have your human interaction layer, right? That's, you have your AI that or your tool, your AI tool that allows you, that is specifically trained to understand what you're saying, right? What is your meaning as a human, right? So that it mitigates the amount of miscommunication there. And then that gets sent off to the orchestrator, who's like, okay, now here's all my Legos. Let's see what we can build. All of these other AIs don't even need to exist until it needs them, and then it builds them, right? And then it puts them together in whatever combination and says, okay, you're going to be the best one to check my work. You're going to be the best one to build the code, and you're going to be the best one to go out and find that information, and then goes off from there. So, I mean, it's just like when we talked about like websites not needing to exist or is personalized to your specific experience. So the code or the tool doesn't exist until it needs to be built until you request what the end result is or what the task is. So that's the way I would look at it.
Wow. Okay. My mind is officially blown. What I am wondering now is, how do we prepare for this? Like, I'm a business person. I'm in a small business. I'm a small business owner. Why does this matter to me? What is my next step? Thoughts?
Well,
I think like when you talk about what a business owner should have, in an ideal world, they would understand that the output of any large language model, and especially ones that are trained on their specific data, is still not 100% reliable. And there is a lot of work that still needs to be put in to ensure that the output is, say, 90% reliable. Then there'll still be a 10% that may not be reliable, and you still have to work at it. Because I do have some clients that are like, hey, you know what? We can do this and we can just put it on and it'll just be a cost. And I was like, you can't do that, because it isn't just like any other tool. Like any other tool has a predictable output. And usually if the output is wrong, I would say 99% of the time, there's some sort of user error, or we did the integrations wrong. There's some actual thing that happened. But with Gen AI, you'll have 10, 20%. For the life of us, we all know this. It just doesn't output what exactly we want. No matter how we prompted it, no matter how many examples, you're just like, why doesn't this do this correctly? And it's getting better model by version because of the reasoning, but you're still going to have that. So it would be important for business owners to say, hey, I understand that. So I understand that aspect and that fact, which then leads to, hey, this is an interesting concept, because then it enables to check against the output. Now, if somebody, here's another $1 million idea, is there something that can check the outputs of large language models in a way that it won't impact the output, but it can actually impact, like it can check it. So think of Anthropic's constitutional model, right? There is like, it checks before it replies, or when you provide a question, it checks against the constitution of what, is based on the constitutional, I think, I forgot what it was called. Anthropic's like, does it meet the certain criteria of being, is it
Helpful?
Yeah, helpful. Is it non-biased? All those constitutional models before an output is created. So is there a way to do that, not that type, but it's like checking it factually, and then also being able to check it in real time through like doing an online search for this stuff. but also understanding if like the sources are legit sources. So there's like, to me, those are the two aspects. So if you can kind of understand those 2 points, I think you're well on your way. But at the moment, very, very few businesses can really grasp that very first point to begin with.
Right. Right.
I'll just reinforce what Carl said, which is for businesses, I think the good news is that these are techniques. We're discussing techniques today that are refining and improving the output of models so that they become more reliable and free of hallucinations ultimately. They will never be free of hallucinations. They just have that tendency, even as humans do. You know, all of us have been involved with humans in the organization, in any organization that you've been working with, who somehow get stuck on a certain idea and you just can't displace it. And it's clearly wrong to most observers in the room. Well, that is frustrating, but we don't then say, okay, well, that person has no value. We can't trust them ever again, right? It's just that, you know, those are what we mean by hallucination. Some generation that gets stuck in a loop that doesn't work. It happens in neural networks in the brain, and it also happens in these very deep neural networks, the trillion parameter networks that you know we're working with right now. So good news, it's going to get better. You know, AI is at its worst right now compared to what it will ultimately be. And these are the recursive, internally reinforcing positive development loops that are being implemented by OpenAI and other companies to dramatically improve the reliability and performance of all the models.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So one of the things that is important about this, if you are looking, if you are in a business and or have some sort of professional responsibility, is understanding the capabilities of AI today and what we're looking at in terms of the capabilities of AIs as we move forward into the future. And two of the CEOs or experts in the last couple weeks have come out. Darius Amadei is one of them. What was Mustafa Suleyman the other one, who were talking about we need 2 more versions or 2 more iterations of improvement before we're going to have fully autonomous AI agents. And the reason for that was accuracy. That when that, yeah, Carl?
Well, yes, because it was Suleiman, and I think was it? I don't know if it was Hassabis or I think it was Dario Amadei too.
Yeah,
It's still 2 more iterations, right? That's the assumption, right? And I think that falls in line with exactly Sam Altman's. Remember that quote he had from? It was more of a marketing quote that AI will replace 95% of what creatives will do, and then reinforced by Mira. Like where she says these creatives weren't designed to be here, and like they shouldn't have been right in the first place.
Yeah.
media training.
Good for her. It's great. But it comes out so authentic. But it's like, yeah, that's kind of where a lot of people were thinking, but it just comes out. I was like, okay, that's great. I think though, they're right on, like all the timelines are kind of all coalesced. They're all kind of speaking the same thing, you know, a couple years here or there. I think, like Andy, you would know this the best. Couple years isn't very long. Like as we all get older, the years get faster. So, you know, 2 years, that'll go by so fast. We're looking 2026, 2027.
Yeah.
And remember who's the I think it was the Anthropic chief of staff that said, "Hey, I'm trying to enjoy the next 2 years or so because all the stuff that I'm working on will be taking over." That person doesn't just say that for the fun of it. That person has like, you know, knowledge of what's coming over the next 2 years. So, you know, it's that's from a business perspective, it's such a slow wake up, but it's there. It's just percolating.
Around the corner. It's around the corner.
And I don't know, will it blow up? Just in like what happened here, I didn't know. And then we'll be in a situation. I don't know what kind of situation we'll be in.
It's totally true. Cisco says she was chief human resources person at Anthropic. Thanks,
Yeah.
Cisco, for the correction. Awesome. So I want to wrap up. We are at our 40-minute mark. Thank you so much for joining us for the show today. We are the Daily AI Show. You can find us at thedailyAIshow.com. We publish a newsletter that gives you a little recap of what we talked about and some more information about what we couldn't talk about on air. Not because it's bad, but because it's there's a lot. We always have more to say than we can say in the time. Thanks specifically to Cisco, Justin, and Jen, and Dev, who I believe came and left. But thank you so much. And the people that we can't see, go ahead and like the broadcast and subscribe if you haven't yet. It really helps us out. Tomorrow is our news show. We will be talking about all the news that has been newsing in the last 7 days. So we hope you will join us there, and go ahead and check out more of the comments because there's a whole conversation going on there that that we haven't been able to pull in. Thanks everybody so much, and we'll see you tomorrow, we hope.
Aloha.